Welcome to the Sober Edge podcast, inspiration for alcohol-free living. I'm your host, Terry Patterson, functional nutritionist and This Naked Mind senior coach. The Sober Edge is a place to explore the infinite possibilities on the other side of drinking. In a culture soaked in booze, discover the wonder and joy of taking a different path. Meet real people living lives of purpose and passion. Learn the truth behind the alcohol myths and get ready to be motivated, inspired, and astounded by what is possible with the Sober Edge. All right. Well, it's Terry back with another edition of the Sober Edge podcast, and it's just me and you today. And if you can hear the excitement in my voice, it's because I am celebrating 8 years alcohol-free. Yes, it's incredible. And it's just gone by in the blink of an eye. And yet so much has changed in my life. And life is so different than it was 8 years ago that it seems like it has been 28 years. And so I was kind of chuckling as I queued up this episode to record because this is episode 108. And we are on the 18th. And it is 8 years today. So I love all the eights, triple eights. I think one time I had dinner in a lovely Chinese restaurant in Las Vegas with my husband, daughter, and son-in-law. And I think it was called triple eight. Like there's something magical about the eights. I don't know. I'm not into numerology, but what I am into is sharing some of the things that I've learned along the way. So I haven't looked back at what I shared when I was 7 years alcohol free or 6 or 5. So some of these 8 things that I wanted to share today might be the same or similar, but I just wanted to indulge, if you'll indulge me, during this podcast episode, I just wanted to bring you into my world a little bit and share with you why I'm so passionate about learning to live without alcohol. And it's something that I hope I will be shouting from the rooftops for the rest of my days. And I am working actively on making the rest of those days vibrant, healthy, and full of joy. And I'm working on getting happier. So let's start there. I am happier now, I think, than I've ever been. And it's really incredible to say that. I've had a lot of good things in my life. I really have. I come from a background of privilege and I recognize that. And I don't take it lightly. But I've had struggles and hard things too. For example, I had a stillborn child. I had an early marriage that ended in divorce. Things that we don't necessarily put in the front of our bio. And so my life has been this beautiful blend of 50-50, things that have gone really well and things that have been really hard. And I think one of the hardest things that I've come through is this journey to get back in touch with who I really am. And so this idea of becoming happy and just having a happy life, I just love what I'm learning right now at the ripe old age of 63, that there's no such thing as happy. We can only become happier. And I love that so much because now I recognize I want to keep learning and growing. Being a work in progress is a beautiful place to be because it means that there's more goodness, there's more experiences, there's more novelty, there's more intensity, there's more richness to this life. And so I am so excited and delighted to be working on becoming happier. And I shared in one of my newsletters recently this idea of the U curve of happiness, where we find that Americans, and I think maybe it's the elderly in general, get happier as we get older. And there was some pushback on whether that study was really cause or correlation or whatever. But I'm just going to keep believing that as I age, I get happier. And one of the things that I've noticed in people who are older than me, looking at the generation ahead of me or some of my friends who are maybe 5, 10, 15 years older is that I kind of see we can go two ways in life. We can become more open, more broad minded, more curious, or we can get closed minded, small minded, narrow minded. And I want to keep focusing on happier as a place of growing into someone who becomes and stays more open minded. So, alcohol freedom has really taught me that. It's taught me that it's okay to not have everything right now. I think in my younger days and when I was drinking, I certainly felt like I was drinking because I was trying to keep up. I was trying to arrive. I was trying to be in that place. And now I realize that the only place to be is right here. So that's one thing that has really been bubbling up for me as I think about what it means to come to this anniversary. And the second thing I'll share with you is this idea of, living more authentically. And I'm sure I have talked about this before, but this is a place of tension for me. It's hard to live sometimes my most authentic life. It feels really good when I feel like I am aligned in the way I show up, the relationships that I cultivate, why I do the things I do, and certainly in my coaching practice. But I also have to accept the parts of me that are kind of selfish and ugly. And that place of authenticity has been a long time coming, right? I think that the freedom from alcohol has allowed me to look at my own strengths and challenges with more grace and more acceptance and certainly more self compassion. And I'm also more willing to work on the things that I want to change and to question following along or doing the things that I used to do just because I've always done it that way. And I think that's a place where authentic living is really showing up for me. It's a challenging place, but what a gift to be able to ask myself without judgment, but with curiosity and love, how's it going? Is this working for you? Does this feel good? What is the response you're getting from other people? Do you want to keep living this way? Is it truly aligned with how you want to show up? In my self experience course for women after alcohol, we do a deep dive into values because with our values, they really tell us what we should be focused on. And we are all, what's so cool is we're all a little unique when it comes to that focus. And so that's part of being more authentic. So I've already admitted I am, cheerfully admitting I am a work in progress. So authentic living, again, is not a place I expect to ever arrive at, but that's something I want to keep focusing on as I grow and change and live this life. And I've been talking recently to you and to many of my clients and the audience that I have who are looking to be hopefully inspired by what is possible when we put down the booze. This idea that it's never too late. And I think that it's really important for me to share that, when I was drinking more than I wanted to and behaving in ways that didn't serve me or others, I was really so disconnected from myself. And I never thought I would be able to come through that in a way that allowed me to live a peaceful, contented life. And I was so wrong. I realized that I needed to change, and I didn't know how much time I had left. I just knew I was miserable living my life the way I was. And so, if you've ever felt like it's too late, I just want to invite you to ask yourself, is that really true? We make all kinds of changes in our life at all kinds of stages. And while circumstances may change and we may not be able to do the action in the same way we would have 10 years ago, it's not too late. And I know sometimes it feels like, well, it's too late for that relationship, or it's too late for to repair that damage, or it's too late to go back and give my children a different childhood. And while that's true in one sense, the relationship that we're really working on is the relationship with ourselves. It's so important to remember that at the end of time, the one person who's going to still be with you is you. And so that's the relationship that we don't want to give up on. That's the relationship that we want to remind ourselves it's not too late. And that's something I've learned in this alcohol-free journey. And many of you have taught me part of that lesson is that it's not about looking back with regret that it's too late to fix this. It's about understanding that there's no fixing that I have to do. And so that's been a really powerful part of learning and growing in this alcohol-free life. And, one of the things that also I've really noticed in this, particularly in this last year, from year 7 to year 8 alcohol-free, is that sharing this journey is becoming more important, more meaningful, more beautiful, more tangible, and more making it more rich. And so I have leaned into some of the opportunities that have come my way to be in the greater community of alcohol-free individuals. I wasn't someone who joined meetings and AA. I did go to AA a couple of times in support of a family member, but I never went to find my own community. And I've had a community of coaches, which has been great, but that has been expanding in a way that feels just really dynamic and exciting. And so I am allowing myself to recognize that the sharing of this journey is really important, and having fun on this journey is really shining out to me at this stage. And so, as you know, if you've been in my world at all, I've been on a couple of the Sober in the City trips, and started, I had my own retreat here with coaches in person in August, and just really looking at how can I broaden who's in my circle of friends and partners in this journey, and who can I bring into the room? Where can I connect more people? I never saw myself as a connector. I always saw myself on the outside. And this was a message I had growing up from my sister, from frenemies in my life, from becoming a cheerleader, but never feeling like I fit in. And so this message of me belonging somewhere and also even connecting people together has been like such an unexpected gift. And so I want to invite you to think about what unexpected gifts might be waiting for you as you celebrate a year, 2 years, or more alcohol free. And this idea of being hopeful, full of hope, that is something that I have really noticed and it comes often from my coaching clients, because I always feel that no matter how stuck someone might feel when they reach out to me, or if they're really feeling down on themselves and maybe even beating themselves up, I always feel hopeful. You might have heard me say before that you can borrow my belief until you have enough of your own, because I believe that this change is possible. And it's because I've seen so many of you and so many women that I've worked with and know in my circles, and some of the stories that I shared these last few weeks are all about hope, all about coming out of a dark place and recognizing that, oh, yes, there's so many possible ways to break through. there's so much hope in this situation. And, personally, my own personal struggles, people that I'm close to who have struggled with addiction or mental health issues, uh, not giving up hope is a place that I want to really stand firm in. And sometimes it's hard, but it's such a gift of this alcohol free life because I see hope all around. All I have to do is look back 8 years ago and recognize, wow, it took some hope and some courage to step out. And so, again, I believe in all of you, and I really feel that hopeful is a gift of this alcohol free life. What else did I write down? I wanted to come up with 8 things. And there's so many good things. I think I remember once one of my mentors, I think she listed like 50 things that she learned in this alcohol free life, but I'm going a little deep today. So thanks for bearing with me. Um, I think, I've learned to take a few more risks, and the risks look different at this stage. As I mentioned, I am well into midlife and loving my 60s, 63, happy to be me. If you didn't hear my birthday episode, that is my sort of mantra for this year. And happy to be me doesn't mean settling. It means working on this place of taking a few more risks. And those risks don't necessarily look like bungee jumping or parachuting out of a plane. They look like extending a hand to someone. They look like entering into a new friendship. They look like saying yes to something that feels just a little scary. They look like being more open when it comes to honest communication and connection. This risk looks like being able to take feedback and even criticism. The risk looks like, putting myself out there with clients and maybe missing the mark. And so I think that I've learned to, first of all, trust my gut more. So the risks feel maybe a little less risky. I've also learned that I'm pretty darn resilient. Like I bounce back, even when things seem like they haven't gone quite the way I wanted them to. And that's been something that's been kind of delightful in this after alcohol life, is realizing that I still take risks. And they don't necessarily look like physical risks. They're emotional risks. They're connection risks. They're personal risks. They're investment in myself and my future. And I actually love that. I want to invite you to think about if you were in a place where alcohol wasn't driving the bus, would you be able to take more risks? And again, I recognize that as someone who has my own business and my husband's retired, like we can pick up and travel places. I can, change the time of day that I work. And so some of those things are, available to me where you might be in a season where things are a little bit more structured. But I also want to invite you, why does it have to stay the same? Would you want to take a risk? What would that look like? I often invite my clients to kind of play a thought exercise. Like ask yourself, what's available to me if I looked at this completely different? What if I flipped the script? So I love that, this alcohol free life has taught me to take more risks and to kind of redefine risk. Also, I've got lifelong learning. This is, it's just so much fun to continue to learn and grow. And I've always been into personal development, and I've been paying attention to this type of thing for a long time. I can remember in my 20s at my first kind of real job, my boss, I worked for 2 dentists, and they took us to see Zig Ziglar. If you don't know who Zig Ziglar is, look him up. But he was one of the first really motivational speakers. And when I think about getting your hopes up, I think about him because he said, when people say, don't get your hopes up, I say, well, doggone it, that's where you want your hopes to be. You want your hopes to be high. And so I can go back to my early 20s and see that I've always wanted to learn more about humans. And I've always wanted to connect in ways that feel hopeful and that, I'm learning new things so that I can share them with you and I can grow personally into a better human. And so I'm going to keep on learning and I want to invite you along for the ride. I love to do this podcast in real time because it gives me an opportunity to share what's happening and what I'm learning right now. And every week I put out a newsletter on Wednesdays and it says what I learned this week. And often what I'm learning comes from all of you or from my guests on the podcast or from the teachings that I do. And that is just so much fun. So what are you looking forward to learning in your alcohol-free life? And then I guess finally, I think I've shared 8 things. I'm going to count real quick. Yeah, the last one would really be this idea of values. And I'll share a little bit about my values this way is that I knew when I was drinking and over drinking and I was miserable and I felt stuck and I was so disappointed in myself and I was hurting and I felt a lot of guilt and shame. I didn't know what values were or what my values were or even how to consider living a values driven life or living within my values. I think I had heard people talk about taking responsibility. I'd heard people talk about honesty, but I didn't know what my values were or even how to get started. And part of the pain that I see when I look back now is the idea that I was living way outside of my values, but I didn't even know what that meant. And so I think in these 8 years, I've been honing and trying on some of the values, maybe for short periods of time, taking them for a test drive, if you will. And, I don't know that my values are completely set in stone. It's just not really in my nature to be so black and white. Or at least I'm growing into someone who has a little more nuance around the corners. And I have 5 identified values now, but I think they shift a little bit. And I think it's really beautiful to consider, where am I learning and growing? And what do I want to bring into my life? Do I want to become more joyful? Do I want to become more abundant? Do I want to start to focus more on inclusivity as I work to connect people together, as I work to help people recognize, where friendship is available and where they do belong and to create communities and that's a value that I don't know a whole lot about at this point, but having a values driven life and knowing what it means to pay attention to the values that drive your life has been such a huge gift. And so if you are someone who is looking to understand more about how values can play a pivotal role in your life, there's lots of good resources out there. I've interviewed a couple people on my podcast. And as I mentioned, we do a deep dive into values in my self-experience course. And I just want to encourage you that if we don't know where we're headed, we might end up someplace else. And so if we don't know what our values are, we might be living on someone else's terms, or we might be living into an outdated version of ourselves. And certainly when I was still drinking 8 years ago, I didn't know, what I was trying to do. I just knew I wanted something different. And so part of this journey for me that I'm so grateful for is the ability to ask the harder questions and to challenge myself and to learn from all of you. Am I living into my values and what does that mean? And now I haven't arrived anywhere, but I have started to understand more how to know and recognize if I'm living outside of my values. So I think that's 8 things that I wanted to share with you. Again, thank you for indulging me. I just am so grateful to have you all here as an audience. And gosh, when I started this podcast 2 years ago, I didn't know if anybody would tune in. I just wanted to offer something that I was hopeful would be inspiring. And so you have far exceeded my expectations in, having a number of people who listen regularly and share that the episodes are often meaningful. And so I just want to thank you all for being part of this journey for 8 years. I'm not going anywhere. This is not a goodbye. It's just a time of reflection. I think that these dates and these rituals around birthdays and anniversaries are really powerful because they do give us that point of reflection and also gratitude. And so I'm so grateful that I made that decision on October 18th of 2015. And life looks completely different. And it's because I've been able to get the clarity to do this work. And I'm so happy you're along for the ride. Thanks for listening. I want to thank you for tuning in to the Sober Edge podcast. This is a place for important conversations and a safe place to question everything you thought you knew about drinking. If you're looking for your sober edge, I want to invite you to connect with me at thesobernutritionist.com, where you can grab my free resource, Becoming More, a guide to loving your sober life. And I would be so grateful if you enjoyed this podcast, if you would leave a rating and review, as it will help more people find their sober edge.